We are going to be practicing estimation in this video, so get pumped. So before we get to estimating, let's talk about rounding, because in order to estimate, we need to know how to round. So when we're rounding, we're thinking about how do we get to the nearest whatever place value we're looking at. For example, if I have the number 4 and 67/100ths, I could round it to the nearest whole. And so, in order to do this, I need to look at the digit directly to the right. And the digit directly to the right is a 6. And so, we have some rules for what this tells us. When we're rounding, really what we're doing is we're thinking about which, in this case, whole number is it closest to. So if I were to write a number line here, 4 and 67/100ths, it's between 4 wholes and 5 wholes. About there would be 4.5. And then we could fill in like so. Voila, it's filled in. So now we're going to think about where would be 4 and 67/100ths. It would be about there. So if I'm thinking about this dot, I'm rounding it to the nearest whole number. So is it closer to 4 wholes or 5 wholes? The 4 or to the 5? Well, I can see that this right here is the halfway point. So everything on this side is closer to 4 wholes, and everything on this side is closer to 5 wholes. This little red dot here falls on the right side, which means that it's closer to 5 wholes. So this 4 and 67/100ths, I round to 5 wholes. So here's my rule, so I know how to do this, so I don't have to make a number line every time I want to round. So I look at the 4, that's the place value I'm rounding, and then I look to the digit to the right. It's a 6. So a 6, I'm always going to go up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I round up. If it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, it stays the same. Here's a rhyme to help you. 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So in this case, 5 or more, 6, it's more than 5, so I'm going to raise the score. So that means this 4, I round up to a 5. So 4 and 67/100ths rounds to 5 wholes. I could also round 4 and 67/100ths. I could round it to the nearest 10th. So there's the 10th place. I'm going to look to the right, and I see a 7. 7 falls right here. 5 or more, I'm going to raise the score. It's more than 5, so I'm going to raise the score. So I change the 6 to a 7. Everything else before actually stays the same. I keep the 4 the same, the decimal point the same, but I round the 6 up to 7, and then everything else after is going to become a 0. So it's 4 and 70/100ths, which I can see down here on my number line. This dot, it's closer to the 4 and 70/100ths than it is to the 4 and 60/100ths. So that makes sense, why it rounds to 4 and 70/100ths. So now let's actually get into some estimating. I have an example problem here. 2 and 38/100ths plus 6 and 52/100ths. So I'm not going to solve this right now. I'm just going to estimate. So in order to estimate, I need to round these numbers. And it really is easiest if you round them to the nearest whole number. Personally, I can add whole numbers in my head a lot easier than I can add decimals. And the whole point of estimating is to just quickly figure out a close guess of what your answer is going to be. So let's look at the first one, 2 38/100ths. I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, so I'm going to round this 2. I look to the right, and it's a 3. 3 falls in the category of 4 or less, so I let it rest. This 2, I'm just going to let it rest. I'll leave it alone. So 2 38/100ths rounds to 2 wholes. Then let's round the next one, 6 52/100ths. I'm rounding to the nearest whole, so I look to the digit to the right, and it's a 5. 5 or more, raise the score. So the 6 now becomes a 7. Everything else after is now a 0. And then I just add 2 plus 7 is 9. So my estimation for this problem would be about 9. Now, the whole reason why we estimate is to give us a good guess of what our answer should be. So if I were to actually go through and really figure out the answer of what this is, I would get 8 90/100ths. I can compare the answer I got to my estimation. 8 90/100ths is pretty close to 9 wholes. So that tells me my answer is probably right because it's really close to what I guessed it was going to be. Let's say I completely made a mistake. I forgot how to add, and I thought the answer was 170/100ths. I could look back and see I estimated it to be 9. So I compare this estimation to the real answer. They're not very close. So that tells me I probably made a mistake when I was adding. So I need to go back and check my work. So that's a reason why estimation is really helpful and definitely something that you should be doing to check your work. Here are 4 problems for you to try now. So you're not going to solve the actual answer. I'll say that one more time. Do not solve the actual answer. You are estimating. That's what this whole video is about, is estimation. So your job is to write your estimation number sentence for each of these. You'll round your numbers, write your new estimation number sentence, and what your estimate would be. So you'll do that for these 4 problems, and then once you're done with that, you can play the video again to check your answers. So go ahead and pause the video now. These are the 4 answers you should have gotten: 25, 1, 30, 2. If you did not get any of these right, check your work and check how you rounded. Look at my work, compare mine to yours, and see if you can figure out where you made your mistake. One thing I want to highlight. Notice how every time I rounded to a whole number. Even though, like for example, on number 3, I could really easily round it to 6 50/100ths and 4 50/100ths. It's not as easy for me to quickly figure out this in my head. I'd probably have to write this down to solve. The whole point of estimation is that it's something that you can quickly do in your head. I can do 6 times 5 a lot easier in my head than 6.5 times 4.5. So that's why we always round to the nearest whole number.